Hello there. I'm Scott,
And I'm Ben.
and this is a review. On today's episode, which is episode 24, we'll be reviewing the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor. Won't You Be My Neighbor tells the story of Mr. Rogers, Mr. Fred Rogers. I don't have a funny intro. This is a true story, so it's a documentary. So
It's a little different.
yeah, but basically this documentary is kind of like the history of Mr. Rogers, how he got started in television and that point forward to his death. Ben, what'd you think about Won't You Be My Neighbor?
I really, really enjoy this. This is my second watch. TJ and I went and saw this last week. Thought it was really, really good. There's not really much going out this week, so...
Yeah, it was either Sicario or Uncle Drew.
Yeah.
And
AKA border warfare movie sequel
Yeah.
or basketball Pepsi concept turned into movie.
Yeah, and I don't know anything about basketball at all, to the point where like I got overwhelmed even trying to think of seeing that movie. And then like
We were talking about LeBron to the Lakers, and you already were like, he was on the Browns in Cleveland.
yeah, I don't
right?
know. I don't know anything. I don't know nothing. So, and yeah, like you said, Mexico border war. We're getting enough of that in real life.
Yeah.
I don't need a movie. So, Mr. Rogers, you know what? We need Mr. Rogers right now. I will
do.
say our world needs
I
Mr.
agree.
Rogers. I agree. I like this documentary quite a bit. As you will imagine with a documentary about Mr. Rogers, it's very sentimental. It's very sappy. It's very just nice, which it should be. I will say that's one of the complaints I had with this is that it's a little bit too one-sided.
Yeah.
It's a little bit too much of a love fest for Rogers.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, if you're looking for the full, like, complex story of Mr. Rogers the person,
Yeah, this is not it.
this is not it.
No.
It touches on some of that. It touches on
does.
some of his self-doubt, some of his struggles when he was a child and stuff like that. So it's not like it's absent by any
No,
means.
not at all.
But-
it does. What I think what's frustrating is that it will start to talk about like people making fun of, like they did the whole Eddie Murphy, Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, and like they showed all these clips of people making fun of him, and then they'd have like maybe one or two people comment on that, and then just kind of brush past it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Whenever we start to grapple with more difficult things, which aren't like heavy necessarily, it's just more like how he was navigating them, you really don't get as much as you would want.
Well, even like there's a point when they even address the ridiculous rumors that he was in like Vietnam or whatever and like
Yeah.
killed children. And like everyone just kind of laughs it off in the documentary. Like, oh, well, yeah, of course he did that. Like, and I'm like, okay, but like, and they're talking about how like the rumor is he's covered in tattoos. Would it not be appropriate at that moment to show him like with his arms exposed or something? But like they definitely did not do that or do that good of a job of denying it.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting chapter if they were like the folklore, because I heard those rumors and
Yeah.
I heard them passed down from my dad, because like my dad, like when this show started was in 1968, literally the year my dad was born, so he grew up on this
Yeah.
shit when it started.
Right.
Not to call it shit.
No, it's great.
It's awesome,
But it's
I heard that like passed down, so like that was folklore.
Well, it's one of those things where like Mr. Rogers was such a genuinely kind-hearted and good person. And it's a rare thing, especially in today's standards, that the cynics of our world, everyone, all of
Yeah.
us, want to poke holes in this and be like, okay, yeah, but really he was molesting children, right? Like, no. I mean, if anything like that comes out for real, I think it'll just kill me inside because, like, especially after watching this movie,
Sure.
because what we currently know about this man is that he's just someone that genuinely loves people, not children,
Yeah.
and that like he had that inner child that never died, and he was able to tap into that and just
Exactly.
reach into people's hearts,
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
way that's so genuine. And the stuff, people try to be like, "Oh, are you gay?" Which why would that even matter? But at the time, that was like, if you're gay, then you maybe must be touching these children.
The gay panic,
Yeah, so like there was a lot of that, and it would have been nice to maybe debunk that more. Maybe kind of get into all that as one lump thing of like he's not gay, he's not
Sure.
this, he's not that. He's just a kind-hearted person who's soft spoken. It's
Yeah,
like just because he's not
exactly.
the definition of masculinity doesn't make him gay.
Exactly. And I think the best thing about this movie, I would say, is how with like the biggest flaw that you could really pick out is that it took him a while to warm up
To homosexuality.
open, and not even homosexuality itself. It opened homosexuality.
Right. Well,
Because he still had a gay black man on his show, and he
that's true.
like was all about it and was making statements with him. It just was because he couldn't the show and the life of the show at that moment usurped the gentleman's coming out and
Right.
being out. And even then, it was like,
Well, yeah, that's like
just
the
in
biggest.
time.
That's the biggest flaw in
Yeah.
Fred Rogers' character
Is that-
that they show in the movie is he literally did say to this man, "You can't go out and be seen as openly gay in public," which is more about the times. But it is like ironic when you see that this whole movie is praising how open to diversity Fred Rogers was, but then on the sideline telling a man that
Yeah.
he couldn't be himself.
Yeah.
It is like that's the kind of ambiguity that you kind of want to see to kind of humanize
For
him
sure.
more. To like, no, okay, this guy was like down on our level to a certain degree.
Yeah.
You know.
But even then, it's like this man who was in the public eye for so long, the biggest scandal around him is that he was a little tentative on openly accepting gay people in like the 70s.
Right,
It's like
right.
still
Oh,
he's
yeah,
still
it's-
tremendously like this tremendous progressive.
looking at it today,
Yeah.
it looks more shady than it was. Obviously, at the
Exactly.
time, he
Yeah.
was reacting to, and he was never like anti-gay or anything.
No.
So, but you know, that being said, yeah, it's fine. Like you want to see the positive stuff. This is a
Yeah.
feel-good movie. This is all about reminding people why we love Mr. Rogers, why he won over our hearts, and it kind of showing his parallel in history was also very interesting.
Yeah, and how he would tap into the current events. Like he had shows on, like sort of talking about Vietnam and talking about
Well, yeah, that was
racial
that's when he
segregation.
started was
Yeah.
during Vietnam, and then they had episodes about the Challenger spacecraft exploding and
Yeah.
like everything. I mean, like he tackled death, divorce, assassination of Bobby Kennedy, which was actually got me kind of choked up in the movie because that really reminds you of like what the world was going or the country was going through at that
Yeah,
time.
there
And, like,
are these moments of just of staggering like calamity, and he would just be out like, and he would communicate to kids and put it into words that like kids could grapple with.
Yeah.
You know, he was talking about like peaceful coexistence and stuff like the first week.
yeah, he
And
was
it's-
bold.
Yeah, and
Well, and I think one of my favorite parts, honestly, was when they talked about Nixon and how Nixon was going to pull all the funding from PBS to fund the war in Vietnam, and how basically the people of public broadcasting had to go out and appeal to the senator. I can't remember the gentleman's name.
Pastore.
Senator Pastore, who was, if you watch the video, he seems like a callous son of a bitch that's just like, all right, I've had enough. Bring on the next idiot. So like he's obviously a man that's made up his mind.
Sure.
And then Mr. Rogers gets out in front of everybody,
Yeah, this committee.
committee, and just speaks from his heart in such a genuine way. He doesn't change who he is, and he actually changes the guy's mind to the or at least enough to win. Like they saved PBS, and it was so wonderful and weird to see this real life footage of something that actually happened. Because now we live in 2018 where our president took away PBS and defunded it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this stuff is still paralleling how 20 years later, 30 years later, and I just kept thinking if somebody got up and gave that speech to whoever, a senator or whoever was kind of making this call, they would not change their mind based on that speech. Somebody that callous, somebody so like, because we've gotten to a point where people don't change their minds anymore, and that's like this weird like, wow, this is a time that we've moved on past, this time of innocence.
Exactly. You watch footage of, obviously there's committees and hearings happening all the time, and it's national mainstream news. Like typically this is the stuff that was delegated to like C-SPAN.
Yeah.
And now it's, everything involving the Trump administration is national news. So you see footage of all these confirmation hearings, all that kind of stuff.
And it's always just
And
echo
it's
chambers.
radically different.
People crossing their arms.
Yeah,
and
people
just,
getting badgered, people on the people trying to testify, like losing their cool and then not even presenting
this
intelligent thoughts on their end.
This moment in the documentary was this pure moment of true, like, thought and listening and like two people listening to one another and communicating, and it's like that's just gone.
Yeah.
And it's
Hashtag
so like,
civility.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, there's so many things that are just gone, and like a big message of this movie was how Mr. Rogers was trying to protect children from corporations, from people that just wanted to sell them sugar and action and lights and not teach them anything of value. And as somebody that grew up on Ren and Stimpy and cartoons and trash TV, but also was limited, it's so like, wow, it does, you see the damage it does, but it's not like damage, but it's like, it just makes you this different kind of person, you know?
And it could be damage for, I mean, depending on the kid, it very well could have been. It's like, you know, like you had trash TV, but you also had parents that gave a shit.
There was a balance, and I think Mr. Rogers is all about that balance and kind of making sure he was like this surrogate parent that made sure that everyone got these like core values that like seemed to they were getting forgotten, like they're being forgotten, and like now they kind of are, like feels like for real,
for sure. And like that's where the waterworks, if you're like a Mr. Rogers kid, will hit you. It's like, you know, if you had your parents who grew up on Mr. Rogers and then they pass it on to you, and you're watching it. I mean, I'm old enough to have been watching regularly programmed Mr. Rogers, so it's like it really kind of hits you in the feels punch if you can't tell.
Well, and they even have a moment at the end where they do touch on the fact that like there was that whole couple of years where like Fox News was trying to claim that Mr. Rogers poisoned an entire generation.
Turn these kids narcissistic.
And because everyone's special and they deserve stuff without trying. It's like Mr. Rogers that was never his point. His point was just that, and they said this very well at the end, is that you don't need to be spectacular to be loved. You can just
good.
Yeah, you don't need to be a celebrity or like the greatest thing ever. And I guess you could argue that that's like making people complacent, but like I think people need to be reminded in this world of people that are all depressed and everyone's addicted to Zoloft, or everyone's depressed and everyone's suicidal and like everyone's negative about everything. It's like, maybe people need to just be told they're loved and not worry about like when I got a participation trophy for soccer when I was 10, I thought, man, this trophy is a big hunk of crap because I still lost. Like kids aren't so stupid that they think that getting a participation trophy is equal to winning. Mm-hmm. And I think they did a good job of kind of eloquently touching on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This movie, this documentary.
Like, the one thing too is like, I think Mr. Rogers' message is ultimately about the value of the individual, which is like it's so weird to like see people, you know, like seeing people on Fox News criticizing him because this is like a Bible-believing, blood-red Christian.
I know. He was a pastor, for
who's
God's
an
sake.
ordained pastor who is telling children, who's talking about individualism and how people have the potential for good. And, like, that's, like, fundamental, not just conservative politics, I would argue, or more libertarian-leaning folks. It's, like, that's just American values.
Well, that kind of... Mr. Rogers was the shining example of how the two-party system is of the lie, and, like, conservative values and liberal values are basically not like it doesn't matter.
It's the slogans of the party. It's what the party's twisted.
Yeah, Mr. Rogers was a conservative Christian man, but was teaching human rights and radical liberal ideas that were like love each other
and racial acceptance.
And it's like he was both and never shoved either of those things down anyone's throats. Like he did definitely, you know, we don't want to go down the religion hole too badly here, but he did definitely practice his religion in a way that I think other people should more, where he was not preaching though, he was talking about social values, he was communicating love and just everyday things that are values in a Christian Bible or a Muslim Bible or most Bibles are values in there, but not attaching the religion title to it, just saying this is how we should be.
For sure.
He never said we should be this way because God says we should, or because this says you should, or that. Yeah. It's just do it. Just be a nice person.
He wasn't the random guy that showed up on your doorstep with a traveler in your face.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so ironic too because he actually the first television evangelist. Because remember the beginning of the documentary, they mentioned
that's how
that
he was ordained technically.
he became a television evangelist,
Yeah.
a televangelist.
Presbyterian. Yeah.
And like at the time, the Presbyterian Church thought that was radical, and now how it's flipped into become this like indoctrination machine of like money and power. And it's like it's this evil thing.
That's how you get the mega churches that are in cities that are ravaged by hurricanes.
Well, then why do you
open
think
them up for as a shelter? They're the size of a sports stadium because they're literally a former sports stadium.
Well, then why do you think that we have news networks that are leaning towards certain religions, condemning a man that would basically spit in the face of all that? He would be today condemning televangelists and saying and having messages about how these people don't, like
they're people running around in $50,000 suits.
Yeah,
he always wore khakis and a sweater.
And a sweater. Yeah, there was a lot of
dressed like a man, like a normal human being.
That one of his sons does mention like it's hard to live up to the footsteps of being the son of the second coming of Christ, and it's like joke, but at the same time, it's like Mr. Rogers is one of the few human beings that did live like Jesus to a certain degree. Like maybe not, say what you will about the Jesus that existed or not. Yeah. But like the Jesus that exists.
The message of Jesus.
The message of Jesus is like he lived through that so well.
Exactly. No, he embodied it, I mean like, and that's the heart of it all. It's just like just trying to be good.
Yeah. Getting back to the actual documentary, just like filmmaking wise, I thought the pacing was a little off, just by and large. Like, they would kind of start going into something, and then they'd kind of slingshot over to something else.
It's a little too scattershot, a little too segmented out, but, like, not, like,
because like they
fully fleshed in the segments, if that
makes
sense.
They would start, like, reading, like, a letter that he wrote about depression, and then, like, all of a sudden it was just like, and then here he is in the 80s doing stuff, and I'm like, okay. There was never, like, a good through line from point A to point B. It was just kind of, like, vignettes of different things that Mr. Rogers grappled with. I almost feel like this could have been a better, like, shorter, like, HBO special or something. I don't know if this is, like, a fully realized motion picture. But, like, a short documentary or, like, a 40 to
or maybe, like,
60 minutes,
Yeah, or maybe if it's, like, a Netflix thing where it's, like, 4 episodes that are about, like, an hour. Because then you can go all the way in.
Yeah.
And then you have, like, 4 hour...
There was all this stuff about... the show he did for adults that I never even knew about.
Yeah, and they sort of touch on it, but like it's
very briefly.
You'd want to go down that. I want to know more about that kind of
I want to know more about his failures in life. I want to know about what he like. That obviously was something that didn't work, but they just kind of like, oh yeah, adults didn't hear the message like kids. Moving back to the kids, it's like no, that show must have failed big time. Otherwise,
let's get into the nuts and bolts of that a little more.
Yeah,
for sure.
Because we like to see people struggle and make it on top through adversity, but
exactly, and retaining if we would have got more about the failures, it would have made his goodness and his persistent goodness
stand out
more impressive.
Well, there was even some small moments where they tried to kind of show the internal battle, and like they hinted at his depression, but they didn't really commit to it. They never said that Mr. Rogers suffered from depression.
Yeah,
but like there was strong implications that he probably did.
At the very least, he struggled with
self-doubt and self-confidence. I mean, there was something going on that like they wouldn't fully lean into. But I think at the end of the day, it's a really heartwarming film, and it's gonna. If you're interested in Mr. Rogers at all, it's something you want to watch.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't grow up watching Mr. Rogers all the time. I watched it here and there. It was like on every now and then, but I don't like have these embedded memories of like everything that is Mr. Rogers. In fact, I probably know Mr. Rogers better from like Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood and like Jim Carrey, like all these people making fun of him. Yeah, Family Guy. But it's hard. It's just such a great message and it's a thing that I think everyone kind of needs right now.
Absolutely.
So if you're feeling down, if you've been feeling just like hopeless about the world and just like you can't do anything, I do feel like this is the kind of movie, this documentary that will really inspire you and make you remember that there's good out there. Yeah.
No, very well said. Very well said.
And on that note, I don't think we need to rate this as a documentary. I'd say I'd recommend it definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. If not, it's still in theaters doing well, but if you can't catch it in theaters,
it'll be on like HBO
any sort of streaming.
Netflix,
I'm sure. Definitely check it out. This the type of movie that like gets a real life on those. So if you can support movies like this, on those platforms,
get a chance, check it out. It's worth watching. And yeah, this has been a review. I'm Scott.
I'm Ben.
And thanks for listening.